You think you know the person sleeping next to you. You don't. I learned that on a Tuesday night while my wife, Piper, was supposedly at a corporate charity gala. She wasn't at a gala. She was in a luxury penthouse downtown, letting her boss undo her dress while they laughed about how easy I was to manipulate. If you appreciate these raw betrayed cheater stories, smash the like button and subscribe. You'll want to see how this chess match ends. I didn't find out through a cliché lipstick stain or a late-night text. I found out because Piper bought a new iPad and threw her old one into the hallway closet. She thought she wiped it. She didn't. I'm a senior data analyst. Restoring a fragmented iCloud backup is what I do before my morning coffee. I sat at my desk, the glow of the monitor reflecting off my wedding ring. The recovered messages populated the screen. I didn't scream. I didn't break anything. My heart rate spiked to 110, stayed there for 20 seconds, and then plummeted back to 60. I felt a brief, sharp sting in my chest, the death of a 5-year illusion. Then, the ice took over. Stoicism isn't about not feeling, it's about controlling the fire. I chose to freeze. The texts between Piper and her boss, Julian, weren't just explicit. They were financial blueprints. Piper was a lifestyle influencer with 200,000 followers. Her brand was built on traditional marriage, loyalty, and wholesome living. But the texts revealed a different strategy. Logan is so predictable. Piper had texted Julian 3 days ago. He works, he cooks, he stays out of my way. Once the equity on the house hits 80% next month, I'm filing. My lawyer says if we play the emotional abuse angle, we can bypass the prenup. He's too proud to fight dirty in public. He'll settle just to save his reputation. Julian's reply made my jaw tighten, just a fraction. Let him keep his pride. We'll keep his money. He's a beta male, babe. He doesn't have the stomach for a real war. They wanted a war. They just didn't realize I was already holding the nuclear codes. Piper came home at 2 in the morning. She smelled of expensive champagne and Creed perfume. I was sitting on the living room couch in the dark, staring out the window at the Seattle skyline. She flipped on the light. She flinched, just for a millisecond, before her influencer mask snapped into place. Oh, honey. You scared me. Why are you sitting in the dark? Just thinking, I said. My voice was entirely flat. No anger. No tremor. She walked over, kissing the top of my head. It felt like a transaction. The gala ran so late. Julian insisted the whole executive team stay for the after party. I'm exhausted. I looked at her. Really looked at her. The tailored dress. The perfect blonde hair. The gold band on her finger that I paid for. She looked radiant, fueled by the thrill of her secret crime. She genuinely believed she was the smartest person in the room. You should get some rest, I said, offering a small, practiced smile. You work too hard. I do, she sighed, checking her reflection in the hallway mirror. Someone has to secure our future, Logan. Your data job is stable, but it doesn't buy luxury. There it was. The subtle degradation. The gaslighting. She was already setting the stage to paint me as the inadequate, abusive husband. I nodded, maintaining the facade. You're right. Go upstairs. The moment her heels clicked up the stairs, I went to work. No tears. No drama. Just execution. The next morning, I visited a forensic accountant and a top-tier divorce attorney downtown. His name was Vance. He didn't smile, which I liked. The prenup you signed is ironclad regarding infidelity, Vance said, tapping his gold pen against my printouts. But her plan to allege emotional abuse is dangerous. If she controls the narrative on social media, judges can get swayed by public pressure. We need undeniable proof of financial fraud and premeditated malice. I'll get it, I replied. But I don't just want a divorce, Vance. I want a total extraction. I returned home and began the paper trail. I installed 3 military-grade, pinhole cameras in our house, 1 in the living room, 1 in her home office, and 1 in the master bedroom. They were wired directly to an encrypted local server I hid in the attic. I also set up a keylogger on her desktop computer. Over the next 2 weeks, I watched the horror show unfold. Piper and Julian used our house while I was at the office. The cameras caught everything. The arrogance was staggering. They sat at my kitchen island, drinking my scotch, openly discussing how they were going to drain our joint savings account into an offshore shell company Julian controlled. "He won't notice until it's too late." Julian laughed on the recording, running a hand through his slicked back hair. "He's a code monkey. He looks at numbers, not real assets." "I almost feel bad for him," Piper said, though her face was twisted into a smirk. "He's just so boring. He thinks a romantic date is a home-cooked meal. Julian, when this is over, I want the Hampton house. Ella's family has an estate there, and I need to show her I belong." That sentence caught my attention. Ella. Ella was Piper's best friend from childhood. But best friend was a loose term. Ella was old money. Real wealth. Her family owned a massive real estate empire across the West Coast. Piper was obsessed with her. She spent thousands of dollars trying to match Ella's lifestyle, constantly buying the same designer bags, trying to get into the same exclusive country clubs. But Ella always viewed Piper with a sort of polite detachment. Ella was classy, fiercely intelligent, and completely private. Piper hated that she couldn't break into Ella's inner circle. I pulled up the keylogger data from Piper's computer later that night. I found a hidden folder containing deleted emails. Piper had been systematically leaking false, damaging rumors about Ella's private equity firm to blind gossip blogs. Why? To tank Ella's reputation so Piper could swoop into, comfort her, and feel superior. Piper wasn't just betraying me. She was a viper stinging everyone who ever cared about her. I leaned back in my leather chair, swirling a glass of neat bourbon. A beautiful, brutal, geometric plan began to crystallize. Piper wanted to destroy my life, steal my assets, and elevate herself into Ella's elite social circle using Julian's help. So, I decided to change the board. I opened my laptop and found Ella's professional email address. I didn't send a long, emotional message. I sent a single, encrypted file containing the forensic evidence of Piper's media leaks, along with a brief note. "Ella, your best friend is weaponizing secrets to ruin your family's fund. Let's have dinner. We can help each other." Within minutes, my phone buzzed. The long game had officially begun. The rain in Seattle doesn't wash things clean. It just makes the fills slick. I sat in the corner booth of the Capitol Grill, an upscale steakhouse downtown where the booths are deep leather and the lighting is low enough to hide a murder. Ella was already there. She didn't look like a woman who had just discovered her childhood best friend was trying to sabotage her multi-million-dollar private equity fund. She looked like a queen deciding which executioner to hire. She didn't look up when I slid into the booth. She was staring at her tablet, scrolling through the raw data files I had emailed her. "Drink?" she asked. Her voice was smooth, like expensive silk wrapped around a blade. "Macallan." "Neat," I said to the waiter who materialized out of the shadows. Ella locked her screen, set the tablet face down on the dark mahogany table, and finally looked at me. Her eyes were an intense, piercing gray. "Piper always said you were boring, Logan. A safe, predictable drone who looks at spreadsheets all day." "I like spreadsheets," I murmured, holding her gaze. "They don't lie. People do." She let out a soft, humorless laugh. "She really underestimated you. This data, it's damning. She didn't just leak gossip. She leaked internal memos about our upcoming tech acquisition. If those blogs had published this next week, the SEC would have crawled up my family's assets with a magnifying glass." "I know," I said. "That's why I blocked the final transmission from her IP address. The data hasn't hit the public yet. I own the server it's sitting on." Ella leaned forward. The diamond pendant around her neck caught the dim light. "Why didn't you just take this to the police? Or a divorce court?" Because the court leaves her with half my assets due to Washington's community property laws, despite the prenup. Her lawyer is good. They are building a narrative to call me emotionally abusive. If she wins the public relations war, she wins the judge. I don't want a legal stalemate, Ella. I want her to lose everything. Her money, her platform, her freedom, and her mind. The waiter dropped off my scotch. I took a slow sip. The burn was clean. Ella watched me, her fingers tapping a slow, rhythmic pattern against her wine glass. And Julian? Julian thinks he's thieving my life savings to fund his offshore shell company, I replied. But he's sloppy. He's using his firm's commercial accounts to bridge the cash flow. He's exposed. You have a plan, Ella stated. It wasn't a question. I do. But I need a lever. I need someone with enough financial gravity to pull them into an orbit they can't escape. Julian's firm has been desperate to pitch for your family's new North Point luxury resort project, right? A cold smile spread across Ella's face. Desperate is an understatement. Julian has called my secretary 6 times this week. He wants our anchor investment. He thinks it will solidify his status as a premier player in the city. Give him the meeting, I said. But tell him you'll only negotiate if he brings his top branding consultant to the table. Piper. Ella's eyes narrowed in appreciation. You want them in the same room with me. Why? Based on my analysis, Piper wants to be you. She envies your wealth, your status, your access. If you dangle a piece of your world in front of her, she will bite. Hard. I need you to hire me, Ella. Secretly. Your North Point project needs a chief logistics officer to audit the contractor data. Let me handle the back-end infrastructure. And the personal angle? Ella asked, leaning back, her gaze assessing me differently now. Piper lives for drama. If she thinks you're just sitting at home being a good little husband, she'll move faster with her divorce timeline. That's the beauty of it, I said. We don't let her think I'm sitting at home. We let her think I'm slipping away. With someone she can never compete with. Ella paused. The silence between us stretched, heavy and filled with mutual understanding. She picked up her wine glass, tilting it toward me. An alliance, then? To absolute ruin. To absolute ruin, I echoed, clinking my glass against hers. I left the restaurant an hour later. The rain had stopped, leaving the asphalt shiny and black under the streetlights. I drove back to my suburban home in Bellevue, parking my Audi in the driveway. Inside, the house was quiet, but the lights were blazing. Piper was sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by ring lights, filming a video for her social media. She was wearing a cozy cream knit sweater, looking the definition of a loving, wholesome housewife. So remember, guys, protecting your peace starts at home. She crooned into her camera, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. Creating a sanctuary for your partner is everything. She cut the recording the second she heard my footsteps. The warmth vanished from her face instantly, replaced by a cold, irritated sneer. You're late. I needed you to move the dining table out of the frame for this shot. Traffic on the I-5. I lied smoothly, taking off my coat and hanging it up. Sorry. She stood up, brushing off her jeans, her eyes scanning me with deep contempt. You smell like expensive steak. Did your little data team have a budget meeting at a diner? Just a quick bite with a colleague, I said. I walked past her to the kitchen, pouring myself a glass of water. I kept my back turned, letting her think her attitude bothered me. In reality, I was visualizing the footage from the hidden attic server. I knew that exactly 3 hours ago, Julian had been pressed against that very kitchen counter, his hands all over my wife. Well, next time, let me know, she snapped, walking into the kitchen and opening the fridge. Julian says we need to trim our household expenses anyway. The utility bills for your server setup in the basement are getting ridiculous. I'm running a business here, Logan. I can't be carrying your hobbies on my balance sheet. It was a classic rage bait tactic. She wanted me to snap. She wanted an argument she could record or log for her divorce attorney to prove my unstable temper. I turned around, my face perfectly expressionless. You're right. I'll look into reducing the power consumption tomorrow. She blinked, clearly annoyed that I hadn't taken the bait. Her eyes KY mine couldn't handle the lack of drama. She needed friction to feel powerful. Whatever. Oh, by the way, Ella called me today. Real Wealth called me. She wants to meet with Julian and me next week about the North Point development. She finally realized my brand is exactly what her luxury project needs. That's great, Piper. You deserve it, I said, my voice empty of any sarcasm. I do, she said, her chin lifting. It's a different league, Logan. The kind of league where people actually matter. Julian says if we lock this down, his firm's valuation doubles. I might have to travel to New York with him next month for the follow-up. Do what you have to do for your career, I replied. She stared at me, searching my eyes for jealousy, anger, anything. She found nothing. Just a blank wall. You are so detached lately. It's like you don't even care about our future. I'm just tired, Piper. Work has been intense. I walked past her toward the stairs. Good night. Yeah, go to sleep. She muttered behind my back. That's all you're good for. I went upstairs, closed our bedroom door, and pulled out my burner phone. I opened the secure app connected to the hidden attic server. I checked the live feed of the living room. Piper was already on her phone, pacing the floor. Julian, he didn't even flinch. She whispered into the receiver, her voice sharp with frustration. He's like a ghost. It's making me sick. I want to file the papers now. I don't want to wait until next month. Calm down, babe. Julian's voice came through the high-fidelity audio system I had rigged. Let him stay oblivious. The longer he's asleep, the easier it is to transfer the remaining mutual funds. Did you get his signature on the insurance papers? No, he said he'd look at them tomorrow. Piper complained. He's dragging his feet. Just use the usual guilt trip. Tell him it's for his own health coverage. He trusts you blindly. Once he signs, that power of attorney rider kicks in, and we can liquidate his personal stock portfolio before he even realizes the marriage is over. I stared at the screen, a quiet, freezing sensation settling deep in my bones. Power of attorney. They weren't just trying to divorce me. They were trying to completely erase my financial existence. If I hadn't found that iPad, I would have been ruined within 30 days. Do you think a person like Piper ever feels guilt? Or do they just see other humans as stepping stones? Let me know in the comments. I closed the app. I didn't feel fear. I felt a profound, mathematical certainty. They had built their entire plan on one assumption, that I was stupid. I opened my laptop and pulled up the financial model for Julian's firm. I had spent the last 48 hours analyzing their corporate tax filings. Julian was hiding a massive deficit. He was running a classic Ponzi-style cash management system, using new client deposits to pay off old investors. The North Point project with Ella was his Hail Mary. If he didn't get her family's anchor investment, his firm would collapse under the weight of an IRS audit within 3 months. He needed Ella. Piper needed Ella. And Ella belonged to the ghost they thought they were burying. I drafted a message to Ella. The trap is set. Let's initiate phase 2. I've found the anomaly in Julian's corporate accounts. He's desperate. Tomorrow, I start working on your back-end data. Let's make sure our public timeline matches. She replied within 30 seconds. Understood, Logan. Let's give them exactly what they think they want. I lay down on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The chess pieces were moving. Piper thought she was playing checkers, loud and obvious. I was playing grandmaster chess in the dark. Every move they made from this point forward would only tighten the noose around their own necks. Tomorrow, the illusion would begin. And Piper wouldn't see the hit coming until she was already underwater. The execution of a flawless strategy requires 2 things: absolute emotional detachment and an unyielding adherence to a strict timeline. For the next 48 hours, I lived like a ghost in my own home. I watched Piper through the hidden lenses of my cameras. I listened to her voice through my headphones. Every smile she gave me was calculated. Every sigh she uttered was a performance designed to build her legal case against me. She was actively documenting my emotional coldness for her divorce attorney. She had no idea I was archiving her entire documentation process in an encrypted cloud directory titled Exhibit A. On Thursday afternoon, the Phase 2 deployment began. I met Ella at her family's private corporate suite inside the Columbia Center. The office was an exercise in minimalist power. Floor-to-ceiling glass overlooked a monolithic, gray Seattle skyline. The rain streaked across the glass windows like silver veins. The room smelled of old money, polished wood, and Ella's signature fragrance, Tom Ford's Black Orchid. It was a heavy, intoxicating blend of dark patchouli and spice. It was a scent that commanded space. It did not beg for attention, it dictated it. Ella was sliding a thick, black leather folder across the polished mahogany conference table toward me. Her gray eyes were cold, assessing, completely devoid of the artificial warmth my wife used for her online audience. Julian took the bait, Ella said, her voice a smooth, low cadence. I had my managing director call him this morning. We offered him an exclusive, non-compete negotiation window for the North Point Resort project. The moment he heard the numbers, his voice cracked over the phone. He genuinely thinks this deal will save his entire corporate infrastructure. I opened the folder. Inside were the live bank feeds from Julian's primary operating accounts, mirrored onto my terminal through the tracking script I had embedded in their portal. He just moved $200,000 from his client escrow account to cover his corporate payroll, I observed, pointing at the digital ledger lines. That is a direct violation of state financial regulations. It's commingling of funds. If the State Compliance Board sees this, his license is revoked automatically. He's desperate, Logan, Ella murmured, leaning back in her leather chair. He knows his firm is a house of cards. The anonymous audit warning I sent his board has them panicking. They are demanding a full liquidity report by next Monday. He needs my family's anchor investment to plug the hole before the auditors walk through the door. And Piper is his accomplice, I said, my voice entirely flat. I looked at the screen, watching the cash flow patterns. She's the one providing the cover story. She's marketing his firm to her lifestyle followers as a premium, ethical investment partner. They are planning to use my personal stock portfolio as the final injection of capital to keep the illusion alive until your contract is signed. Ella stood up. Her movements were slow, deliberate, perfectly graceful. She walked around the table and stopped directly in front of my chair. She leaned down slightly, her face inches from mine. Your wife wants my life, Logan. She wants my status. She wants my name. She has spent years pretending to be my friend while secretly trying to pull me down to her level. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a heavy, solid silver cufflink. It was custom-made, featuring her family's geometric crest, embedded with a single, flawless baguette diamond. She slipped it gently into the side pocket of my wool jacket. Then, she leaned her shoulder against my chest for a lingering second, purposely transferring the concentrated, rich aroma of her black orchid perfume onto my collar. Let's see how well she handles a taste of the world she's trying to steal, Ella whispered, stepping back with a sharp, dangerous smile. Go home, Logan. Give her the breadcrumbs. Let her eyes KY mind do the rest of the work for us. I drove back to Bellevue during the peak of rush hour. The red brake lights of the cars ahead of me reflected off my wet windshield like a neon grid. I didn't play the radio. I preferred the silence. It allowed me to calculate the variables. A normal husband would feel rage. A normal man would feel sick to his stomach knowing his wife was planning his financial execution. I just felt a deep, mathematical satisfaction. They had chosen to play a game of leverage against the data analyst. They were bringing knives to a drone strike. When I unlocked the front door of our home, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Piper was in the dining room, her ring lights casting a harsh, blinding glare against the walls. She was surrounded by mood boards, fabric samples, and printouts of Ella's real estate portfolio. She was trying to build a presentation that looked old money, but everything about her setup screamed desperate ambition. She didn't look up when I closed the door. She was furiously typing on her phone, her thumb clicking against the glass with a sharp, erratic rhythm. "Where have you been, Logan? I texted you at 5. I needed you to pick up the catering samples from the French bakery downtown. The servers at the main facility suffered a localized thermal spike," I said smoothly, hanging my keys on the magnetic wall strip. "I had to stay until the backup cooling arrays stabilized. My phone was in the secure locker." She finally stood up, tossing her phone onto the pile of fabric samples. She walked toward me, her heels clicking aggressively against the hardwood floor. She opened her mouth to unleash another scripted insult about my salary or my job, but she stopped dead in her tracks 3 feet away. Her nostrils flared. Her eyes widened, focusing instantly on the right side of my collar. The immediate shift in her body language was a masterclass in psychological guilt. Her shoulders tensed. Her jaw locked. She took a deliberate step closer, her head tilting as she inhaled the air around my neck. She recognized the scent instantly. She had spent months trying to find a knockoff version of it online. "What is that?" she demanded, her voice dropping into a dangerous, quiet hiss. "What is that smell, Logan?" "I don't know what you're talking about," I replied. My face was a mask of absolute, unbothered calm. I looked through her, not at her. "Don't lie to me!" she screamed, her influencer facade completely shattering. She grabbed the lapel of my jacket, pulling me down toward her face. "You smell like Tom Ford Black." "Orchid. That is a $250 bottle of perfume. Your little tech coworkers wear vanilla body spray from Target." "Who were you with?" "I didn't pull away. I let her hold my jacket. I kept my eyes locked onto hers, letting the silence stretch between us until the pressure became unbearable. I deliberately let my breathing remain slow, steady, and robotic." "Piper," I said, my voice dropping into a tone of quiet, patronizing pity. "You are projecting again. You need to calm down." "I am not projecting," she shrieked, her face turning a deep, blotchy red. "I know what I smell. You're seeing someone. You're cheating on me." I gently reached down, unlocked her fingers from my lapel, and stepped back. I looked at her with a calculated expression of clinical concern. "You've been working 18 hours a day on this North Point pitch, Piper. You aren't sleeping. Your engagement numbers are dropping, and your stress levels are through the roof. I think you're having an anxiety episode. You're hallucinating sense." "I am not crazy," she gasped, her chest heaving as she stared at me. "I didn't say you were crazy," I replied smoothly, my voice mia but measured. "I said you are paranoid. For the past 3 months, you've been completely detached. You take your phone into the bathroom. You lock your computer when I walk into the kitchen. You stay out until midnight with Julian under the guise of corporate strategy. And now, you walk up to me and invent an entire narrative about high-end perfume because I worked late at a server farm? Is there something you want to tell me, Piper? Are you feeling guilty about something?" The reverse gaslight hit her with the force of a physical impact. Her eyes KY mind could not process a counterattack of this precision. Her entire strategy relied on me being a passive, oblivious victim. By flipping the script and using her own behavioral anomalies against her, I left her completely disoriented. Her mind began to race, trying to figure out if I actually knew about Julian, or if I was just making a lucky guess based on her erratic behavior. She stumbled backward, her hand flying to her throat. She looked at me, searching my dead eyes for a sign of hidden knowledge. She found nothing but a cold, flat mirror reflecting her own deceit. I have nothing to tell you," she stammered, her voice suddenly losing its venom, replaced by a defensive tremor. "Julian and I are trying to secure a multi-million-dollar contract with your childhood friend's family. I am doing this for us. I don't appreciate you attacking my character because you're insecure about my success. I'm not attacking you, I said, walking past her into the kitchen to pour myself a glass of ice water. I'm just observing. If you want to talk about insecurity, maybe we should look at why you're checking my collar. She followed me into the kitchen, her anxiety turning into a desperate need to regain control of the power dynamic. She needed to lock down her financial trap before I slipped out of her grasp. She grabbed a thick manila folder from the counter and slammed it down next to my water glass. If you actually care about our family's security, you need to sign these tonight, she said, her voice shifting back into her practiced, manipulative corporate tone. Our financial advisor said we need to update our comprehensive asset management and health insurance waivers before the end of the fiscal quarter. It's a standard optimization package. I looked down at the documents. The bold lettering read, Comprehensive Family Health Umbrella and Asset Management Authorization. I knew exactly what this was. My hidden microphones had recorded her and Julian discussing this exact packet 3 nights ago. Page 47 contained a hidden, non-standard power of attorney rider. If I signed it, Piper would gain unrestricted legal authority to liquidate my premarital investment accounts, worth $450,000, and wire the liquidity directly into Julian's offshore entity under the guise of a corporate loan. Our advisor said it's urgent, Piper pressed, thrusting a sleek black pen into my hand. Her eyes were wide, hungry, fixed on my right hand. She was practically vibrating with anticipation. She believed this was the moment she officially owned me. I took the pen. I flipped through the pages. But I didn't sign her document. 2 hours ago, my attorney Vance had given me an identical, forged duplicate of her packet. I had spent 20 minutes in my car swapping out pages 45 through 50. The pages I inserted looked identical in font, spacing, and paper weight, but Vance had completely inverted the legal parameters. Instead of granting her power of attorney, the modified text explicitly stated that Piper acknowledged all my stock portfolios, retirement accounts, and home equity were strictly separate, premarital assets, and she irrevocably waived any and all future claims to them under any legal jurisdiction. Furthermore, it included a binding clause stating that any unauthorized transfer of funds from my accounts by a third party would automatically trigger an immediate, non-bailable criminal charge of grand larceny and corporate fraud. She had been so blinded by her own greed, so distracted by the smell of Ella's perfume, that she didn't even notice me slide the modified packet across the marble counter. I looked up at her. I gave her a small, gentle, submissive smile. Of course, honey. If our advisor says it's necessary, I trust you. I leaned over and signed my name on the lines. I initialed every single page, including the trap pages Vance had engineered. I pushed the folder back to her. Piper snatched the packet off the counter with a speed that bordered on predatory. Her fingers clutched the cardboard edges tight. A look of supreme, arrogant triumph flashed across her face. She thought she had just wiped me out. She thought she had just left me penniless. Thank you, Logan, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. I'll make sure our broker processes this first thing in the morning. You can go back to your spreadsheets now. You're welcome, I said quietly. I took my water glass and walked upstairs to my study. I sat down in the dark, put on my noise-canceling headphones, and activated the live audio feed from her office downstairs. Within 5 minutes, she was on a secure line with Julian. It's done, she laughed, her voice echoing through my headset with a sharp, grating arrogance. The idiot signed everything. He didn't even skim the text. He's so easily managed it's almost pathetic. He actually smiled when he handed it back to me. Perfect, Julian growled, his voice tight with immense relief. I'll contact our broker at Vanguard tomorrow morning at 8. We'll initiate the wire transfer of the $450,000 directly into the Cayman Shell account. By the time he realizes his portfolio is empty, the North Point contract with Ella will be fully executed. We'll file the emotional abuse divorce papers, and he'll be buried under court costs while we're sitting in the Hamptons. Julian, we need to finalize everything this weekend, Piper said, her tone suddenly dropping back into a nervous flutter. He's acting weird. He came home smelling exactly like Ella's custom perfume tonight. He tried to turn it around on me, telling me I was paranoid and stressed. It was cold. His eyes didn't even look real. Julian let out a loud, mocking laugh. He's a beta male trying to play a tough guy because he feels you pulling away, Piper. He doesn't have the assets, the brain, or the leverage to do anything. He's a data monkey. Forget his eyes. Focus on the Vanguard charity gala this Saturday night at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel. Ella sent over our VIP table invitations. That is our stage. That is where we lock down her family's millions and announce our corporate expansion to the media. We win, Piper. Completely. I pulled off my headphones. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the heavy silver cufflink Ella had left in my jacket. I placed it on the desk next to the encrypted flash drive containing Julian's fraudulent corporate bank logs. They thought they were walking into a coronation on Saturday night. They thought they were going to stand before the elite of Seattle and celebrate my destruction. They had no idea that the broker Julian planned to use at Vanguard was already under a federal disclosure mandate secured by Vance. The second they attempted to move that money tomorrow morning, they wouldn't touch a single dollar of my assets. Instead, they would execute a legally binding confession of grand larceny, fully documented by the very papers Piper was holding in her hands. The stage was set. The trap was locked. And on Saturday night, in front of everyone they ever wanted to impress, I was going to pull the lever. How far would you go to protect your life from a predator wearing a wedding ring? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. The final move is coming. And the subdue will be absolute. The morning of Friday arrived with the cold, sterile precision of a calculated data script. I sat at my home office desk at precisely 7:59 a.m. The room was completely still, smelling faintly of the black coffee cooling in my ceramic mug. My dual monitors cast a pale blue luminescence across my face, reflecting off the clean, bare wood where my wedding band had sat until 24 hours ago. I watched the digital clock on my taskbar shift to 8 a.m. Right on schedule, the tracking program I had embedded into our synchronized financial portal began to flash. A single, crimson notification box populated the center of my primary screen. External transfer initiated via Vanguard private portal. The amount was exact, $450,000. The destination asset pool was listed under a secure routing node, Cayman Crest Holdings LLC. I leaned back in my leather chair, my body completely relaxed, my heart rate holding at a steady 62 beats per minute. I didn't blink or squeeze my hands into fists. There was no sudden rush of adrenaline, no heat rising to my face. When you look at the world through the lens of pure logic, numbers cease to be emotional triggers. They simply become data points moving across a predetermined vector. Julian had pulled the trigger on my entire life savings, believing I was a broke, helpless husband whose future had just been liquidated to fund their private paradise. They had no idea that the broker node Julian was using at Vanguard had been flagged under a federal tracking mandate 48 hours ago. The money hadn't moved to the Cayman Islands. It had slid directly into a secure, frozen federal escrow account monitored by a specialized team of legal and regulatory auditors. My phone vibrated against the desk. The screen displayed Vance's name. I picked it up on the first ring, my voice flat and even. "Logan. It's a complete lock," Vance said, his voice a crisp, dry baritone, free of any dramatic inflection. "The routing signature Julian used belongs to a verified commercial corporate entity under his direct personal custody. He used the exact forged authorization packet your wife submitted to the automated clearance desk. By executing that transfer under those precise, altered parameters, they didn't just attempt a theft. They legally executed a binding confession of third-degree grand larceny, identity theft, and interstate bank fraud. The federal paper trail is absolute." "And the regulatory response?" I asked, watching the ledger data mirror onto my local drive. The IRS Criminal Investigation Division received the complete, audited transaction logs of Julian's commingled client escrow funds an hour ago. Vance replied, the sound of papers rustling over the line. A field office here in Seattle just assigned an active investigative team to the file. They are moving with extreme velocity because of the specific dollar amount and the corporate escrow violations. They won't interfere with his movements today or tomorrow morning. They want the public arrest window to minimize the risk of him attempting to shield his liquid assets overnight. Perfect, I murmured, watching the crimson alert box turn into a solid, unblinking green line. Let them have their stage. I'll see you tomorrow night at the Fairmont. Be careful, Logan, Vance said quietly. A narcissist experiencing a total systemic collapse can become highly unpredictable. A narcissist only becomes dangerous when they have options, Vance, I said. I've removed all the variables. There are no options left on her board. I hung up the phone. I took a slow sip of my coffee. The liquid was bitter, completely cold. Saturday evening arrived with a heavy, oppressive fog that rolled off the dark waters of Puget Sound, blankets of gray mist swallowing the Bellevue skyline. Inside our house, the atmosphere was suffocatingly loud without anyone speaking a word. Piper had spent the last 4 hours locked inside her vanity suite, transforming herself for the Vanguard Charity Gala at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel. She had hired a premium, independent celebrity makeup artist and a personal wardrobe stylist for the evening. Our master bedroom looked like a premium retail store after a riot, littered with luxury shoe boxes and high-end garment bags hanging from the light fixtures. Piper emerged from the suite wearing an emerald green silk gown, featuring a plunging back and a dramatic, structured train that swept across the floor behind her. It was a loud, aggressive piece of clothing designed specifically to scream for attention, to dominate social media algorithms, to look expensive from a distance. I stood by the corner closet, buttoning a standard, tailored black tuxedo. It was plain, unremarkable, the kind of suit worn by men who prefer to blend into the architecture of a room rather than command it. Piper paused in front of the full-length mirror, adjusting a heavy, platinum-plated necklace that didn't belong to her family's collection. She caught my reflection in the glass, a cruel, deeply mocking smile touching her lips. She turned around slowly, her heels clicking against the wood, looking down at me with an expression of supreme, unadulterated contempt. "You're actually wearing that old suit, Logan?" she asked, her voice dripping with artificial pity. "To the Vanguard Charity Gala? You look like a member of the catering staff." "It fits," I said smoothly, checking my cuffs. My voice was completely flat, devoid of any defensive texture. She let out a sharp, dismissive laugh, turning back to her reflection to apply a final layer of dark red lipstick. "I suppose it doesn't matter. Nobody is going to be looking at you tonight anyway. You're just my plus one." Julian secured our corporate brand a spot at the premier table right next to Ella's family estate directors. When the media crews ask for interviews on the red carpet, stand completely out of the frame. Don't say anything. I don't need your data jargon or your boring corporate tone ruining my presentation to the anchor investors. "I'll stay completely out of the way, Piper," I said. She walked up to me, stopping just inches away. Her breath smelled of mints and expensive white wine. She raised her right hand, her long, manicured acrylic nail tapping hard against the center of my chest. Her eyes were wide, bright, fueled by an intoxicating rush of absolute superiority. She genuinely believed she was looking at a ghost, a broken husband she had successfully bled dry. "Enjoy the luxury tonight, Logan," she whispered, her voice a toxic teasing. "Purr. Look around the Fairmont. Take some pictures. Memory is a beautiful thing. Because after this weekend, your comfortable, boring little world is going to change permanently." "I'm sure it will," I said, my eyes locking onto hers. I didn't blink or pull away from her finger. I simply observed the microscopic twitch in her left eyelid, the subtle sign of an overextended ego running on pure delusion. She didn't notice that my left ring finger was completely bare. I had left my gold wedding band sitting on the marble kitchen island downstairs, right next to the empty folder of the documents she thought she had used to ruin me. The Fairmont Olympic Hotel was an architectural monument to old money opulence. Massive crystal chandeliers hung from the vaulted ceilings of the grand ballroom, casting a warm, brilliant amber glow across 300 of Seattle's wealthiest citizens. Tech billionaires, real estate moguls, political figures, and elite media executives moved through the space in a sea of black silk and diamonds. The air was thick with the scent of expensive catering, heavy floral arrangements, and the underlying current of raw capital power. Piper didn't even wait for me to valet our vehicle. The moment the Audi pulled up to the grand curb, she threw the door open and stepped out into the camera flashes, her emerald train catching the wind. She didn't look back to see if I was following. She ran straight toward Julian, who was waiting near the limestone steps of the entrance. Julian looked immaculate in a custom, dark midnight blue velvet tuxedo, his hair slicked back with high-gloss pomade. He held a crystal flute of vintage champagne in his left hand, his right hand tightly clutching a premium smartphone. By the time I walked through the main lobby doors and approached the edge of the grand ballroom, the two of them were huddled near a marble column. They were whispering furiously, their faces illuminated by the bright screen of Julian's phone, completely oblivious to the crowd around them. "The transaction log is still showing as pending settlement under the Cayman node," Piper muttered, her voice tight with a volatile mixture of intense greed and sudden anxiety, her influencer mask slipping for a brief second. "Is that normal? It's been over 24 hours, Julian." "Calm down," Julian replied, his voice a low, condescending growl as he patted her bare shoulder. "It's a weekend international wire of nearly $500,000. The Vanguard high net worth clearance system automatically holds transactions of that size for a standard compliance verification loop to ensure liquidity match. Don't let your paranoia ruin tonight, babe. The electronic signature page Logan executed is entirely binding. The bank approved the document packet. The money is legally in our custody node. By Monday morning at 9, his stock portfolio is empty, our offshore entity is capitalized, and we use Ella's anchor investment to erase my firm's operational deficit." He turned his head slightly and spotted me standing exactly 5 feet away. My hands casually slipped into my tuxedo pockets. He didn't flinch. His arrogance was a massive, impenetrable wall of clinical delusion. He straightened his velvet jacket, flashed a wide, predatory grin, and extended his hand toward me. "Logan! Glad you could make it out of the data lab tonight," he said loudly, his tone dripping with patronizing theatricality. "Quite a step up from your usual cubicle architecture, isn't it? Try not to touch the art." I didn't reach out or move my hands from my pockets. I simply stared at his extended palm, my gaze dropping to his wristwatch, then moving slowly back up to his eyes. The silence between us stretched for 4 seconds, heavy and cold, until Julian's arm began to stiffen. He slowly dropped his hand back to his side, his grin turning into a sharp, rigid sneer. "It's a large room," I said evenly. "It's a room for executive operators, Logan," Julian said, leaning in closer, his breath heavy with the scent of premium bourbon. "People who understand market leverage. People who know how to take exactly what they want from the board while the lesser players are asleep. You should really keep your eyes open tonight. You might actually learn how the real world handles asset accumulation." "I am always analyzing the board, Julian," I said, my voice entirely flat. Piper linked her arm tightly through Julian's, her eyes flashing with deep irritation as she looked at me. "Let's go find Ella's father, Julian. We don't need to waste our leverage standing around the entrance area with the background noise." They turned their backs on me, their heads moving close together as they glided into the center of the ballroom floor. I stood entirely still, watching them navigate the crowd. They looked flawless and completely untouchable, genuinely believing they were the authors of this story, having no idea that every step they took was tracking exactly along a pre-programmed path toward a structural demolition. I moved through the perimeter of the ballroom, ascending the grand stone staircase toward the private executive balcony that overlooked the entire event. Ella was waiting there, standing near the velvet railing next to a tall, unblinking man dressed in a charcoal gray administrative suit, Agent Miller from the Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation Division. Ella looked exceptional in a minimalist, structured white satin gown that stood out against the dark wood like a blade. Holding a clear glass of mineral water, she kept her gray eyes fixed on the floor below, where Piper and Julian were currently attempting to corner her family's primary fund manager. The Vanguard system logged the transfer validation attempt at precisely 8:02 yesterday morning, I said, my voice barely a whisper against the low hum of the ballroom orchestra below. My family's compliance directors executed the immediate corporate injunction 10 minutes ago, Ella said, her tone completely freezing the space around us. Julian's firm has been officially severed from our North Point database infrastructure. His entire board of directors just received an automated, encrypted legal notice stating that their firm's operational liquidity is under federal review for escrow fund manipulation. And the multimedia presentation? I asked. The AV event coordinator is one of my private tech infrastructure leads, Ella said, a faint dark, my smile appearing on her lips. He initialized the local server override using the encrypted flash drive you provided. The main Charity Foundation media showcase is scheduled to go live on the central ballroom screens in exactly 3 minutes. Agent Miller reached inside his tailored jacket, pulling out a small encrypted tablet to check his team's deployment logs. My field units are currently stationed at every primary and secondary exit of the Fairmont Ballroom, Mr. Logan. The moment your digital paper trail populates the main displays, we execute the active arrest warrants for corporate larceny, identity theft, and financial fraud. Thank you for providing such a clean, mathematically indisputable chain of custody. The numbers never lie, Agent, I replied. They just wait to be balanced. The ambient ballroom lights suddenly plunged into absolute darkness. The chattering of the 300 wealthy guests dropped into a quiet, expectant murmur as the massive, 30-foot high-definition digital projection screens at the front of the grand hall illuminated with a brilliant white light. The Vanguard Charity Foundation logo appeared on the screens, followed by a booming voice welcoming the elite crowd to the annual showcase. Piper stood directly near the front VIP table, her smartphone raised high to record the moment for her social media stories, her face twisted into a mask of supreme, arrogant satisfaction. Julian stood right beside her, his hands clasped in front of his velvet jacket, a look of complete corporate victory written across his features. Then, the center screen flickered with a violent burst of digital distortion. The orchestral audio track stopped, replaced by a sharp, deafening static hiss that echoed through the premium speaker arrays, cutting off the announcer mid-sentence. The Charity Foundation graphics vanished entirely. In their place, a high-definition video feed of my living room filled every massive screen in the room. The silence that fell over the Fairmont Ballroom was instantaneous, heavy, and completely terrifying. On the massive screens, Piper's face appeared in high definition as her voice echoed through the surround sound speakers with absolute clarity. Julian, he didn't even flinch. He's like a ghost. I want to file the papers now. The idiot signed everything. He didn't even skim the text. He's so easily managed it's almost pathetic. He actually smiled when he handed it back to me. A collective, massive gasp rippled through the 300 guests as heads turned simultaneously to lock onto Piper. Her smartphone slipped from her fingers, hitting the thick carpeted floor with a soft thud. Every ounce of color drained from her face, leaving her a horrific, ash-gray color under the amber chandeliers, her influencer mask completely dissolved. Before she could move, the digital display cut away from the video feed to a massive, side-by-side financial ledger. It displayed the private operating accounts of Julian's firm right next to my personal stock portfolio logs. The line items highlighted the unauthorized $450,000 wire transfer request, stamped in bold, glowing red text, Federal Escrow Freeze, Grand Larceny Investigation in Progress. Next came the deleted emails, showcasing high-resolution captures of Piper's verified IP address systematically leaking confidential, proprietary acquisition memos to blind gossip blogs to tank Ella's family fund, exposing her complete identity to the very people she had spent her life trying to impress. Julian's smug expression vanished. A thick, greasy sweat broke out across his forehead, causing his premium makeup to run down his face like melting wax. He spun around on his heels, his boots sliding against the polished floor as he lunged toward the main exit doors. He didn't make it 3 steps. 3 silent men in charcoal gray suits stepped out from the shadows of the exit corridor, blocking his path. Agent Miller stepped forward, pulling a pair of heavy, stainless steel handcuffs from his belt. Julian Vance. Miller's voice cut through the silent room like an iron bar. You are under arrest for federal corporate fraud, grand larceny, and illegal commingling of regulated client funds. Put your hands behind your back. The sharp, metallic clicks of the handcuffs echoing through the silent ballroom sounded like synchronized gunshots. Piper ran toward Julian, her emerald green gown trailing behind her as her voice cracked into a high-pitched, hysterical shriek. Julian! Do something! This is a mistake. Logan did this. He's a psychopath. He altered the data. He's trying to ruin us. She spun around to the crowd, her arms flailing, her eyes wide and bloodshot as she searched for a single friendly face among her elite peers. But the high society of Seattle was already stepping back, creating a 20-foot wide void of empty space around her, isolating her like a lethal contagion. The brand sponsors who had praised her lifestyle account 10 minutes ago turned their backs, their faces filled with pure, unadulterated disgust. She looked up at the private balcony. She saw Ella standing there, looking down at her with a face of solid, unyielding stone. And right next to Ella she saw me. I walked down the grand stone staircase, my movements slow, measured, and completely relaxed. My hands were still in my pockets. I stopped exactly 5 feet from where she stood trembling on the carpet. Logan! She sobbed, her knees completely giving out as she collapsed onto the floor, her expensive emerald green silk gown pooling around her like waste. She crawled forward, reaching out with her manicured hands, trying desperately to grab the hem of my trousers. Logan, please! You have to listen to me. It was Julian. He forced me to sign those files. He manipulated my branding account. You know I love you, Logan. Please tell these people it's just a data error. Tell them to stop. I looked down at her. I didn't feel a surge of anger. I didn't feel a single ounce of pity. I simply felt the quiet, cold satisfaction of a data analyst who had successfully cleared a corrupt file from his system. You should have read the modified packet, Piper, I said, my voice cutting through the silent ballroom with absolute precision. You didn't liquidate my assets. The pages you signed were a full, legally binding waiver acknowledging that every single stock portfolio, retirement account, and home equity asset belongs entirely to me. And by executing that wire transfer on those altered terms, you and Julian didn't steal my life. You just handed the federal government an indisputable criminal confession. Vance stepped out from the crowd of onlookers, stepping next to me as he handed a thick, notarized stack of legal documents to a waiting court courier. The immediate divorce filing has been processed and approved by the county clerk, Piper. You have exactly 72 hours to remove your personal clothing from Mr. Logan's primary residence. Every other asset, account, and platform attached to your name has been frozen under a global corporate injunction. 2 uniformed security officers moved in, grabbing Piper by her elbows and hoisting her off the floor. She screamed, a raw, broken, primal sound of total, unmitigated narcissistic collapse. She thrashed against their grip, but they dragged her effortlessly through the grand doors, out into the freezing, torrential Seattle rain. She left the building completely exposed, socially dead, and permanently penniless. I turned my back on the exit doors. The ballroom lights slowly returned to a soft amber glow, and the orchestra resumed playing a quiet, classical arrangement, trying desperately to mask the trauma of the public execution that had just taken place on their floor. I walked back up the grand staircase, joining Ella on the elevated balcony. We didn't exchange words. We didn't need to. We simply raised our glasses, looking out over the dark, rain-slicked grid of the city below. The paper trail was clean. The assets were perfectly protected. The ruin was absolute. They wanted to play a high-stakes game of manipulation with a man who calculates systemic outcomes for a living. They forgot the most fundamental rule of the board. In a game of Grandmaster chess, the king moves slow, but he always sees the whole board before he pulls the lever. Hiding behind a wedding ring doesn't make a predator invisible, it just makes their footprint easier to track. If you found this journey of strategy and pure logic satisfying, share your thoughts below. How far would you go to protect your life from the person sleeping next to you? Let me know in the comments. Let's talk about the moves they never saw coming.